So kia ora, everyone. Thanks tons for joining tonight on this very chilly, wintry eve. To introduce myself, my name is Shaun Edlin. I am the CEO and one of the co-founders of Dotterel. Excuse me, completely losing my voice. Dotterel, the creators of Conos. With the talk that I'm going to give tonight, I'm really going to explain the background of Dotterel, kind of how we got to what is now the Conos product, explain what the Conos product is and how it's being used, and also where we're going to from there, where we're taking Conos.
And by the way, this is Conos.
And we're using a Conos all night, which is super cool. I think, yeah, I just having a technical problem with the clicker.
All right, it's Windows.
Yeah, no, it's never a Conos.
And the sound's going through, you can hear it down the back? Cool, nice.
It's working now? Yep. Cool, awesome. So really from the start with Dotterel, we've spent a lot of time on film sets. And if you go onto a modern film set today, one of the things that will really strike you is the level of innovation that goes into the camera systems, the new tracking systems, just stupendous levels of innovation across the board, except when you get to the sound team. And this is usually the team that's kind of relegated to the corner. They'll be holding this boom, trying to keep out of shot, out of the way. It's kind of like one of the more less glamorous parts of Hollywood. But the thing you will notice is that the microphone technology that they'll be using is the same technology they've been using for the last 40, 50 years. There's really a complete lack of innovation when it comes to audio technology. And really with that lack of innovation becomes a number of constraints. And at Dotterel, we've really been driven on how do we overcome those constraints, because those constraints that stop us from capturing audio in high noise outdoor environments. It stops us capturing audio on things like drones, which is where we started. And that's what I'm going to talk to you now, the evolution of kind of solving the problem in the drone world to creating a very unique microphone product. Might need the next slide, please, sir. So as I mentioned, we very much started out as a drone company. This is what we call aerial audio. And what we're doing here is providing a microphone array technology on a drone, which is essentially a flying lawnmower, one of the loudest things we could put a mic on. To do that effectively, and for us to have done that effectively, a microphone needs to be able to do a couple of things. So importantly, it needs to provide capture audio over very long distances. It needs to, because you're up in the sky, you're recording at a high height. It also needs to have very strong directionality. It needs to have good signal processing because you're trying to extract all that propeller noise. And then it also has to deal with things like wind getting bashed at the microphone, the vibration, this hulking mass in the sky. And those are all really hard things to do. Really would pick kind of operating a microphone on one of the most challenging environments you can get. And the type of use cases, next slide, please. The type of use cases where we were creating this for, working with public safety groups all around the world, in particular search and rescue groups, were use cases like this one you see here. Now, this is a photo of the aftermath of Hurricane Dorian, where drones were used fairly extensively in the rescue efforts. Those drones are being used to see people that were kind of above ground and help rescue them. But for a number of survivors, they were stuck under rubble, underground. And while they might not have been seen by the drone, they will have been heard yelling out for help. And so for us, it was really about solving that problem. How can we help locate human survivors through using sound to complement visual systems? And then once these people are found, it's also about communication, because it's just skipped one yeah, didn't even press anything there. Once they've been found, how do we effectively communicate with them to understand, do they have injuries? Are there other survivors? Get all that critical information. So that's one exciting use case. The next one is as shown here. And this is work that we did in North America with a number of public safety groups there. So LAPD, fire, and this was aerial audio, microphone array technology being used in mock hostage scenarios, shooter scenarios, where essentially we've got a hostage on the third floor of a building. Usually to communicate with that individual, we're going to need to have a throw phone or a walkie-talkie that a SWAT team has to try and chuck up there, hoping that someone picks up. With what we were doing, we were flying the drone up, instantly getting critical information such as where in the building is the shooter located, what's the location of other survivors, all critical information that was immediately relayed down to the ground teams so that they can then therefore enter the building having full situational awareness and deploy forces appropriately. So that's all really kind of exciting stuff. However, at this point, we'd been doing this for a couple of years, and at this point, we were also finding it very challenging, in particular, to turn what were demonstration systems like this into a scalable product. There are a number of reasons for why that is, and I kind of won't go through all of them now. We can talk through them in the Q&A. But one of the big ones is that in order to turn this into a product, you really have to partner with a drone manufacturer. You're kind of looking for integration, design-ins, and when it comes to those drone manufacturers themselves, you've got this market where you have this Goliath in China that is DJI, and then you've got a very fractured drone market below that of a number of smaller players. It's very difficult to navigate a commercial path in that market. You're really trying to figure out how to design into those platforms, get into their radio backhauls, make the payload work nicely on their airframes, but you're also trying at the same time figure out how you can get a licensing deal, how you can get an integration deal, and it's all just expensive, timely, and slow, and just ultimately a real slog. So next slide, please. And so this kind of led us to a point where it was very challenging for us, but a really cool thing started happening in early 2020, about the same time COVID kicked off, and the cool thing wasn't COVID, it was the fact that outside of the manufacturers who we're building these relationships with, we were getting end users in public safety. So, the police groups, the fire groups, the defense groups, they were starting to take the drone payload platform off of the drone and put it on their ground robots, put it on their police cars, police vehicles for two-way communication. We had security companies that were starting to trial it, hooking it up to their camera systems so they could hear calls of distress, so they could ultimately help people. And when that started happening, when the end users driving that really led us to kind of change our thinking and realize that, hey, we'd started at the hardest problem first, which is at that drone space. But noise is this problem for many different platforms and many different applications. And so ultimately it led us to kind of change this belief and really start to think of this microphone technology as not just an implementation that can be used in a few unique niche use cases, but as a platform technology. Another really cool thing started happening around this time too, and that's that, as I mentioned before, we were doing a lot of work in the screen industry, and that's kind of a bit of a side effect of working with drones. You kind of like aerial cinematography is the biggest use case there is for drones, so you just naturally get sucked into that industry. But we were doing a project with Disney around this time, and what happened is the sound guys and girls on those teams, some of the best in the world, they said, well, hey, that looks a lot, what you've got there on your drones looks a lot like our existing shotgun microphones, our directional mics. Can we take that off and start using it in production? And we were like, go for it. And so that was utilized across really challenging environments, high wind, high noise. And the feedback we got straight away was awesome, was like, hey, not only do they really value the features and the capability that were designed into this, but they just love the way it sounds, just the fidelity of the microphone, which for us was totally unexpected. We didn't design this to sound like a really nice high-end mic, but it was enough of a trigger for us and enough of an endorsement to say, like, okay, platform technology, but you can't do everything at once. You've kind of got to pick your market and really nail that. And we felt with entertainment, we had the highest value proposition and some of the lowest technical barriers to get quickly to product. And so from then on, it was really about pursuing that rapidly. If you want, next slide, please. And so essentially kind of going through prototype, these like behemoths with like 3D printed and wires hanging out, but which functionally work, to kind of taking in feedback, reiterating, making it look a little bit more sexy, and getting it back into wider and wider groups of users. And what we were doing is working towards building a product primarily for this use case. Now, this is a typical outdoor Netflix shoot. For the sound people, it's what's called location sound. And the way that location sound works is you're just dealing with wind noise, traffic noise, just a heap of noise. And what these people here, the boom operators, need to do is kind of try and get as close to the sound source as possible, awkwardly trying to stay out of shot, while at the same time trying to capture this really clean dialogue in this environment. More often than not, they don't, which means that all of the cast and crew have to, or not all of the cast have to go back to a re-recording room. Months later, they have to redo all of their lines. It's called ADR. It's super expensive and super time consuming. So we really set out with this product to solve this problem initially. Next slide. And in doing so, again, working in like multiple iterations, and working kind of starting with very friendly users to maybe not so friendly users where we're getting the real feedback, we came to Conos. And I guess first to explain how this differs from the microphones they're using. So a typical directional microphone or a shotgun mic is a single microphone element, a condenser element at the end of a long tube. And the longer that tube is and the precision machining of that tube defines how it sounds, and defines, most importantly, its directionality, or the capture area of the microphone. This looks a lot like a shotgun microphone, or this, but what it is fundamentally different. It is very important, though, that it has the form factor of the existing microphones, because it still needs to fit in with the assembly, the connectors and adapters and all the existing workflow. It's a really important thing to get right when you're entering an existing ecosystem.
So this is a standard stand, isn't it? So
just standard, yeah. We kind of make them all kinds of different stands for different, different types of windshields and what have you. So to explain, though, what Conos is, though, and how it differs, because it is fundamentally different. Next slide, please. So I might need you to click as I click this. So what it is, it's not one microphone, it is 80 microphones. And what those 80 microphones do is provide very high quality over very long distances. It also, how about that? It also is the world's first microphone where we can change the directivity to match the environment, going from very narrow, just capturing a single speaker. I think we might be on the medium at the moment, to very wide, capture kind of a complete 180. You've never really been able to do this with a microphone. So you've got kind of many microphones in one there. The other thing we do is we have multiple outputs. So not only are we always outputting the target audio, what we want to capture, but we're always also outputting simultaneously to everything else. And so the way to think about this is in channel 1, we'll give it a rugby game, sports example. You have the rugby player kind of 20 meters away in that channel 1. And then channel 2 will be all the crowd noise, and they'll be able to creatively mix that in. So again, that's another multiple microphones in one. It just provides a lot of creative flexibility. And then the last output is optional real-time noise removal. So this is what we've always done on the drones. It's about where we're removing propeller noise. Here it's about removing wind noise. It's about removing traffic noise in the urban environment. It's kind of used as this plan B backup channel when a normal microphone just wouldn't cut it. So next slide, please. So we're really making a real splash with this in Hollywood at the moment. We soft launched Conos earlier this year, and the feedback we've had has been really amazing. The ways it's being used are things like location sound. So this is kind of that typical location sound, battle scene and long distance, to live journalism and live sports. So this is just from a few weekends ago. It was the UEFA Champions League final where we had Conos set up around the field. And yeah, it's just been this fantastic experience working with end users. I was going to point there that just a month or two ago, I'd actually won the Product of the Year award. at the NAB show, which is the world's largest screen industry trade show. And I guess really, pretty stoked to have won that for such an early and new product. What's been really exciting though is this use case over there in the corner with Epic Games logo. So this is virtual production, and very interestingly, a significant number of our sales have been for that market in particular. This is the new way we capture content. I think it's worth just diving into what that is for a little bit. So next slide, please. So this is behind the scenes of the last season of The Mandalorian, and some of you will be familiar, but if you're not, pretty much all of The Mandalorian and pretty much any sci-fi big background show at the moment is shot on these LED volumetric, what are called LED volumetric sets or virtual production sets. And the way that works is for anything that's like, no longer do we use green screens when we need to do special effects and impressive environments. We don't send people up to Tatooine. Instead, we have the cast in this room that is surrounded by these high definition LED TV walls. And so the action and the special effects is right there on set, right there around the cast and crew. And it means that what's being captured on the camera is exactly what's happening there on set. It's this principle called final pixel. It's this awesome new way to capture content, but it's bringing all these challenges with the way that we capture sound. What's been really exciting for us, and just to explain what those challenges are, you're essentially trying to capture audio in what is a big parabolic dish, this big echo chamber. And that's very hard to do. A normal microphone just won't cut it. What we've found with Conos, or what our customers found, is you can create these zones of usable dialogue on these stages. We don't promise that we have the magic bullet for this yet, but it's really guiding. We're getting some fantastic results. It's really guiding the next stage of product for us as we move more into software, which I'll explain now. And so this is what's next for Conos. Essentially, what we've built so far is a digital hardware product that is made to work in the analog world that audio exists in right now. However, the industry is evolving and changing, and it is moving digital. And so what we're creating and designing now is a fully digital end-to-end system where all of those features and controls exist within software. And that just provides ultimate flexibility. No longer are we limited to those 3 preset patterns that you're controlling with a dial. We can provide any pattern in any direction, not just in real time, but also in post after the fact. So bring these principles of with raw camera, you can kind of get the raw camera information and you manipulate it after the fact, allowing you to do that with audio, being able to make that sound be whatever you want it to be after the fact. Then there's some smarts we can layer on top of that. So being able to layer on different levels of filtering, noise control, being able to layer on localization, because we're an array. We know where sounds come from in relation to where the array is facing. So that's just as useful in surround sound in sports, where you want to know where the kicks are coming from, as it is in public safety and security, where the sound of a bottle smashing over there means, hey, potential dangers happened over there, divert cameras and focus on that part of a building or area. I won't go into this too much deeper because I'm probably going well over time. Yeah, that's definitely happy to kind of answer some questions on that. So really, I guess just to sum everything up, look, once we'd really understood kind of, we had something very special, and particularly in the entertainment market, it was about understanding what features were most valuable to those customers and within the realms of our capability, so that we could turn that into at least prototypes, demonstratable or operational field units. It was then about getting those out into the world and having those tested by friendlies. And I guess the word friendly is really important, because a really big learning for me has been that the feedback that you're getting in the friendly stage is not the same product feedback you're going to get the following year when you've got to MVP and you've released the thing into the wild. When that's when you get the real feedback. That's really brutal, because you think you've got perfect product then, and you realize you've made a bunch of mistakes. So there's this constant iteration, like iterative cycles, and it goes on right to this day. Right now, we're in this introducing the capability stage to the pro audio world. We're still continually iterating. You can see the slide's been all weird there. But very much in that iterating, we've actually very shortly about to launch some new SKUs, which are based on a product that we've launched, but little tweaks we could do to provide SKUs that fit within some really interesting different use cases. And that's something we're just executing on very quickly. So constant learnings. Ultimately, though, with that, what we want to do is kind of redefine what audio is in the pro audio market, which is still reasonably specialized, before ultimately, when we turn this into a hardware software product, just redefine what a microphone is for everyone across many different use cases. So yeah, that's me. I do want to say on the last slide, I do thank you very much for listening. I'm very happy to answer a bunch of questions. Do want to give a big shout out to Dan Gray, who designed the slides and designs a lot of our
He's
sites.
based here, isn't he?
He's based here in Asset.
Yeah.
He is, yeah.
Yep.
And particularly as startups, if you're designing decks for pitching, he's awesome and he'll make all your stuff look fantastic. So get him his contact details and find him somewhere here.
So what about, because I guess we're quite keen to hear about some of the real challenges. So is there anything from this journey you've been on that have been really challenging?
I mean,
that you maybe haven't already talked about.
Yeah, I think that like the real challenges is like versus being a software company is that you're going to learn a lot about the product, and some of it's going to be like, hey, this has worked for this segment of the market. This is a dog for this part of the market, and you're going to have to make some changes. When you get that, it's not a simple, do some coding tweaks and I'll change things. It's full
redesign,
full redesign. You got to go through kind of full design, PCB manufacture, just timing, expensive, and that's like I think a brutal aspect for pretty much anyone that does hardware. It's there's a saying, hardware's hard, and it's also for that reason, like it can be a scary place for investment.
But if you do it well, then you don't have too many competitors because everyone's scared.
Because it's so hard, exactly. So that's where you have a real edge. But I think we're doing what many hardware companies doing, and we'll soon hear is a very effective thing to do, which is how can you increase scalability by not locking everything purely in hardware and crack some of this out into software?
Yeah. Well, that's good. So thanks very much for that. There will be an opportunity for a sort of group Q&A later on. So cool. So we've now got our next speaker, John Wagner. And so I met John, it would have been at Aeroqual many years ago. And so I was in there helping Aeroqual. And at that point, you were more on the science. You were a science?
Product development.
Product development.
Yep.
So I met John there, and I guess there's been the whole journey of Aeroqual, which we'll hear about tonight. And he's now moved on to another company called Aofrio? Aofrio. Get the name right. There's a meaning behind it. He might be able to tell us about that. Right. So I think what'll be interesting here, we've just heard from Dotterel, which certainly started off as a hardware-only sort of product, with the idea, wow, there's some other opportunities maybe in the software space. So they're relatively new to that. Whereas the companies that John's been working at, they've sort of been that right from the start, I think, haven't they?
Well, almost. Actually, I'm going to talk a little bit about an area which I find intriguing and challenging as a product manager, and that is companies which sit on that precipice between hardware and software, and product management challenges associated with trying to launch a product to market which has a hardware and a software component. But before I do that, I just wanted to give a real quick shout out to the high-tech awards, companies that won the awards. The high-tech company of the year, that was the premier category. I was a little bit disappointed to see that there were no hardware representatives in the category, but a big shout out to Sin7 for winning the overall company of the year. But two hardware companies took out the most innovative high-tech agri-tech solution. That was Halter. I'll just talk a tiny little bit about those guys. And the high-tech startup company of the year, ZeroJet, very cool company doing electric boats. But hardware needed its own category to get recognition. And congratulations to Dawn Aerospace for winning that category. Dawn Aerospace are incredible. They make a plane which takes off from a traditional runway, flies to space, releases a payload, and then lands on a runway. So incredible company.
Yeah.
A little bit about me. So I started my product journey at a company called Aeroqual. Aeroqual makes air quality monitors. Our customers are governments like the New Zealand government or Auckland City Council, who have a mandate to measure air quality all over their catchment. We were an international company right from the start. Our biggest markets were China, Mexico, Latin America, Eastern Europe. And my most recent product placement is with a company called Aofrio. Some of you may know us as Wellington Drive. We've recently rebranded. AO is Terreo, it means our world, and frio is a Spanish word meaning cold. So it's our world of cold. And we service the refrigeration industry. Our products go into all of the bottle coolers that you see whenever you go into a petrol station or a dairy or a supermarket, and you see that wall of Coke fridges or Pepsi fridges. Our technology goes into those coolers, collects data about the performance of the cooler, and also the number of times the doors open and shut. And all of that data gets sent back to the brand owner, Coke, Pepsi, Heineken, to give them some business insights about how well their coolers are operating. So I thought a little bit about what to talk about. I thought Shaun's going to get up and talk a little bit about developing a hardware product from scratch. I'm not sure how many people in the audience work at hardware companies, but there are certain unique challenges associated with hardware that don't exist with software. One of the biggest ones, of course, is there's a supply chain component to hardware. Both Aeroqual and Aofrio got hit very hard with the supply chain crunch that happened over COVID. We both used micros that became very scarce very, very quickly. Although that particular challenge hits the engineering function the hardest, what happened in the product team was our roadmaps got completely destroyed because all of the product development resource that was going into future product had to go back into legacy product to redesign circuit boards and firmware on micros that went obsolete, well, not obsolete, but got given to companies who paid more for them than we would. Channel to market also is different with hardware. It's not common for a hardware company to be able to ship product from a factory direct to a user. It does depend a little bit on the volume of product. Typically, however, there's a distribution channel between yourself and the end user. They handle importation companies. They handle, sometimes they can handle training and service and support. Whereas with SaaS companies, you do tend to be able to deal directly or ship, in inverted commas, directly to the market. Product development cycles are long, of course, compared to software. We'll talk a little bit about that. And with hardware, often a lot of your development resource or your product resource is heavily loaded at the front end because you really can't have your hardware team starting development until they've got a reasonable amount of product specification. So a lot of your product development costs and time is right at the front with a hardware product compared to software or SaaS, where that product development cost is often spread out across the timeline of your product. And of course, hardware products do have sorry for those of you who missed half of that slide. But I was just talking a little bit about some of the unique challenges associated with developing and delivering a hardware product as compared to software. Those of you in the software space will be very familiar with this. It works well in SaaS. This is the continuous development, continuous integration model. It encourages move fast and break things. It encourages continuous discovery. And it works quite well in a pure SaaS company. It doesn't really work so well in a hardware company. David won't like me saying this, but hardware development is a bit waterfally.
Just a bit. But there's aspects of it that need to be.
Yeah. But that's not to say, however, that there aren't frameworks out there which attempt to bring a little bit of agility into hardware development. I can't profess to be practicing them religiously. The one takeaway from this slide, again, goes back to something I pointed out earlier, was that a great deal of the work is front-loaded with hardware development. A lot of your product resource and your engineering resource and design resource front loads before any, let's say, code is cut, or in the case of hardware, CNC machines are spun up or circuit boards are designed. Yeah, so what I really want to talk about, however, is this really, really interesting space where hardware and software kind of come together and deliver, a solution, to use the product terminology. So, ZeroJet, again, fantastic company. They do an e-boat, but their product is primarily a hardware product. Again, congratulations to Sin7 for taking out the high-tech product of the year. Why have I got a picture of a cow on the screen? This is Halter. Halter make a collar that goes around the neck of a cow. I don't know if anyone here is from Halter or knows about them, but it collects data about the activity of the cow, the health of the cow, sends all that data back to a SaaS front end, and allows a farm manager to actually manage his cattle. And I believe they can actually influence the behavior of the cow through that system. So that's really, really incredible product, which relies both on the hardware and the software to fully deliver the value.
Yep. So they you can get the cows to come up to the shed for milking, but also you can have virtual fences. Right. So you can break feed a paddock. But you can do it without having to have string wires across.
You can actually, I just imagine a farmer steering his cows into
like a PlayStation.
Really, really interesting. So it's a bit of a delay between the clicking and the thing. There we are. So I'm imposing this title upon Halter. Hardware-enabled SaaS is kind of a place where I really enjoy my product management. This is where you have value delivered through a front end, through a software product that relies upon a piece of installed hardware. And it's a very common theme developing in the IoT space. Okay, so a little bit about the two companies. Both Aeroqual and Aofrio started off in a similar way. We both had early stage, highly innovative, unique hardware solutions that solved a very particular problem for a unique set of customers. Both had patents, both were really well received, both were a component in a much larger solution. Like many companies, what tends to happen after you get through that early stage, you grow out your solution to cover more use cases, to be more of your customer's solution. In the early stage, in the mid stages, Aeroqual ended up developing full-blown air quality monitoring stations, and Aofrio controlled more of the cooler for our customers. Software was really just a twinkle in the eye of both companies at this stage, and these are mid-stage companies with a fully developed supply chain, developed engineering function. We always joke at Aeroqual that we would often be shipping product, obviously literally shipping, and having a FedEx guy standing there waiting to get the box, and we would forget to burn the software to the CD because it had to be included in the box. So both Aeroqual and Aofrio kind of got to a mid-stage. They got to a degree of market saturation, and more of the value of the product was being taken by the customer literally in the form of a USB stick or an SD card, and they were creating value for themselves in some other platform. Could even just be Excel. So both of the companies, kind of not at the same time, but both on the same journey, said to themselves, okay, this is we've got to evolve. Man, there's a big delay here.
Because Anthony's sitting there pressing the button.
And so two mature companies with mature engineering functions both kind of said, hey, let's do SaaS. And my goodness, what a challenge that was for an established company with culture around hardware and culture around electronics and so on.
I think the business model as well is a big part of it.
It is.
It's quite different.
So why might an organization want to move to a SaaS product or add SaaS to an existing hardware portfolio? Well, one reason is that hardware revenue can be quite lumpy. This was definitely the case with Aeroqual. All companies have a kind of a break even, that they hope to meet each month. Aeroqual had a range of hardware products. We had some entry-level products and we had some flagship products. Month to month, we may have either got to break even with our entry-level products, and then hopefully the sales team got those big sales, those big flagship products, so we would have a good month with good cash flow, or we could have a really lean month if we're waiting for those big lumpy sales to come through. This will happen to you, Shaun, eventually, maybe not right now. But this is probably the situation with Aofrio a little bit, that the hardware eventually can become commoditized. When that happens, the price gets squeezed and the company wants to find other sources of revenue. And the third reason, valuations of SaaS companies, and this is a governance problem, an ownership problem, are often valued a little bit higher than hardware companies of equivalent revenue. These are all valid reasons, possibly, for going into SaaS or having a SaaS problem. But of course, we're product people here, so hint. The motivation really should be about what do the customers need, right? What do they want, and what value can you deliver? It was interesting. Why is it that SaaS companies are valued higher than hardware companies of equivalent value? I thought I'll ask one and see what it says, because I wasn't sure. Well, I did know, but I was curious. It actually gave me some fairly sensible answers, 1, 2, and 3. Scalability at minimal cost, that's definitely valid. Yeah. Significant recurring revenue is a big one. Markets like recurring revenue compared to hardware revenue. You can update products more quickly with SaaS than you can with hardware. I don't necessarily believe at point 4, software companies often possess valuable intellectual property. I think most intellectual property probably is more loaded onto the hardware side. It may be being a little bit biased because I'm quite sure OpenAI, despite the name, has probably patented some of its work. And the very last sentence was just word salad. I'm not really quite sure what it was trying to tell me.
Software.
So what are the challenges? What are the actual challenges? And in my case, my experience of a hardware company becoming a SaaS company or wanting to add SaaS. Now, equally, these challenges can work in reverse. If you're an established company with a SaaS product and you want to add hardware, you're going to come across the same kind of challenge. You're dealing with 2 very, very competent, very highly skilled engineers from completely different tribes. This can be really challenging, especially if you're in a product space, because you're trying to manage deliverables to the market and deliverables to your customer on completely different time scales. Both of these 2 people, these engineers, have different risk profiles. They have different ideas of what it means to deliver. They have different ideas of what it means to ship product. I don't have a clear solution for any of you who might be facing this problem, but only for any of you who are thinking of adding hardware to software or software to hardware. You have to think very, very carefully about how your engineering teams are going to work well together. When they do, it can be amazing, but it can fall apart quite quickly. User personas. User personas can be different as well. When you're used to shipping hardware product to hardware users and you suddenly want to be able to ship software product to software users, you need to understand your user personas, and it can be quite difficult for a company established in a hardware space to understand the user personas in software. This is particularly problematic or can be challenging when the hardware influences how the software behaves or the software influences how the hardware behaves. So I've run into trouble where the software can now make changes to what the hardware is doing in situ, in the field. And so your users are now influencing each other, because it's not most likely that the user for your hardware component is not the same user who's going to be using the SaaS or the cloud component. So they can actually clash with each other. And so as product managers, it's incredibly important that we understand how these personas behave. The sales function differs. I think David alluded to this a little bit before. The sales cycle and the sales incentives and how sales and marketing is done with hardware can differ a fair bit compared to SaaS. Selling hardware, often you have to think about forecasting, especially if you have a long production schedule. So in my case, the sales team would close a deal, but the product wouldn't be shipped for probably 2 or 3 quarters. This can create a big gap between when the sale is made and when the value is realized by the customer. The levers they can pull can be around, I can get your product to you quicker if you pay a little bit more money, or maybe if you buy in volume, I can give you a discount. The sales incentives and the levers that a SaaS salesperson might pull are a little bit different. Maybe I can bump you up to a higher tier, or I can add a component of the higher tier product and pop it into the lower tier product. So it's a very different way of selling. And of course, again, this notion of shipping product and getting the product to the market changes a little bit between hardware and software. So shipping product, old school, is literally shipping product, of course, and shipping product and software, if it goes well. If it goes well, it's just deployed to production, merged to production. Okay, click of a mouse. I know it's not that simple. But it also introduces some very interesting challenges about when the customer pays. Does the software subscription start when the product ships? If it's a subscription, is it all paid in one go? It does create some challenges around managing customer accounts. Finally, if the engineering challenge isn't great enough for you, and if the user personas aren't challenging enough for you, and if the sales cycle and motivating the sales team isn't challenging enough, customers can respond in odd ways to a product which has a hardware and a software component. Ideally, all going well, the customers will say, we want both. We want your hardware and we want your SaaS solution. We get value from both. That's a win. One problem that you might find, and it's possible, Shaun, that you might encounter this, we really like your hardware, but we have an existing SaaS supplier and we'd like you to integrate your hardware into our cloud solution, right? This presents some very challenging strategic as well as technical, but primarily strategic questions. Would I sacrifice the SaaS revenue in order to get a foothold in the hardware market? And then, of course, you've got to make sure that your technical team know how your competitor's SaaS product works and that it can integrate well. So this can be really, really challenging. It'll definitely happen, and it happened to me when we were developing a SaaS product from the beginning because our customers had an existing product. So it's challenging technically and it's challenging strategically, but it can happen in reverse. And actually, this was curious that once our software, and this happened with Aeroqual, once our software became mature, we had customers that had legacy hardware from our competitors, and they said, actually, we really like what you've done with your software, but we have a legacy, and this could well happen to you, Shaun, as well. We still have a whole lot of your competitors' hardware that we don't want to write it off, and we can't afford to buy your hardware, but can we connect all of our competitors' hardware to your SaaS platform? Now you've got to engage with your competitors' hardware and make sure that they have either an SDK or some kind of protocol that you can connect. So both of these present challenges. They present challenges in different ways. I just don't have a solution because I think it is unique depending on where you sit in the market and how unique you are, how competitive you are. The commoditization of hardware probably means that you will end up in a market where everyone is dropping the price of their hardware and a lot of the value is trying to be realized in the software. So you will often, it's called hardware agnosticity in the SaaS world, where you say, we don't mind whose hardware connects to our SaaS platform. Okay, I think we're running out of time. So I'll speed through. So those are some of the challenges that I saw as a product manager and are currently dealing with. The title of the talk that David set up, Not Just Software, is really well entitled because it's really just not software in my word, and it's not just hardware. There's a unique space where hardware and software play together strategically, and it's a uniquely challenging space, but a really rewarding one. Thanks.
Cool. Thank you very much, Shaun. Okay, we're just going to do a little bit of a reset. We're going to have some Q&A session.
Okay.
So
Shaun and I?
Yes, that's correct. Okay. And what I might do. Hello.
Super interesting.
Does it sound okay? Cool.
Thanks.
So I guess I'll start the questions. So John, with both the companies you've been working at, have you considered not being an upfront cost to the hardware? So it is purely monthly?
Yes.
Like hardware as a service sort of thing?
Yes. So not in the Aeroqual model because the price of the hardware was just too high to do that. So what you would need to look at for that to work is, well, for how many years or months would a customer need to subscribe to my SaaS solution to cover the cost of the hardware?
Yeah.
So in the case of Aeroqual, that would have been 10 to 15 years.
Right.
Right. So that's a long payback time. Right. In the case of Aofrio, that time frame is reduced a little bit, maybe down to 2 to 3 years, possibly.
Yeah.
Again, depending on the price you can put on the SaaS platform. So the answer is yes, but you have to have a very brave senior executive team that would be willing to essentially give the hardware away for free or at cost in order to win the SaaS game.
Yeah, so it's quite a different business model and different drivers, and people are used to selling things in a certain way.
Exactly.
And your customers are used to it as well.
That's right. Yeah, well, the customers would love it.
Yeah.
If you gave them the hardware.
Yeah, I know, but then the monthly cost would be more. So
that's true, but you would also have to enforce a contract with the customers, right?
Sure.
So it can't be a voluntary subscription if that's going to work.
Yeah,
exactly.
Yeah. And what do you think with yours, with Dotterel, could that be an option?
We've looked at it. I think realistically, getting the hardware for free and getting the hardware and utilizing that without the SaaS platform still actually provides value in the way that we're looking. It still operates like a mic. It still has some basic functionality. So there was no real requirement there to give the mic away outright for free. But I do think it's a model that works, and a company that we kind of admire is Axon, who do the body cams for policing. So they've got a really interesting model in that they essentially give away what is quite expensive hardware. These body cams, those that they do sell, they sell them for like incredibly cheap for the market they're in. And some they do rentals. And the idea is just always to get it on kind of the chest of every cop there is. But in doing so, just charging what was kind of $25 a month, every single camera requiring that $25 a month license, reasonably low value. They just kind of ensured that they could completely penetrate the US public safety market. And now, if you look at that company last year, they did 1.5 billion in revenue, and it's almost like all evidence.com, the SaaS platform they've built. So they've gone from like a full hardware company to just complete, like all of their revenues just software from these $25 subscriptions.
And I think it'll be the case with the camera. It's probably a commodity camera at the end of the day. I imagine there's not a lot of unique innovation in the camera.
And they can do that.
And maybe their cost is quite small in comparison. So it really depends on the situation, I think.
It does,
sure.
Yeah.
So any questions from the audience? Sure.
First question.
Okay, well, I'll give you the mic if you like. You can
ask your question. Is the tech ring? So my question is, did either of you build anything into your hardware to allow you to iterate faster? So was there any thought given to actually front loading some of that fast iteration stuff on the hardware side?
I guess with us, it's all FPGAs, and I guess one of the advantages of FPGAs is it does allow you to make changes. The people that make the changes are very expensive, but it does allow a lot of flexibility in the ability to kind of continually iterate and change that embedded software. So that was, I guess, a design decision that allowed us that kind of flexibility because it takes a long time to get product lock and make decisions on specific microcontrollers that you would use that are ultimately cheaper but don't have any flexibility.
Well, I guess we see these days, I guess with the Teslas, they've got all the hardware there, but haven't necessarily enabled it just yet. So that means, I guess, the physical product's got a longevity for that. But the problem is, I guess, when you're planning your projects and what products you're going to bring to market, you need to plan further out. Well, what is it going to need to do in 2 years, 3 years, maybe? So you've got to think about that. And unfortunately, that probably ends up adding more cost to the hardware to begin with. But later on, you get the real advantages. So you've a few things there to balance.
Definitely.
Any questions? Do
you sell out like do you lease the
So
in my case, it's a sale.
So I'll just repeat the question. So the question from the audience was, is it like a lease or do they buy it outright?
So in my case, the products are sold, so we don't hold a lease on the products. In Aeroqual's case, we would sell to leasing companies, and they would lease on our products to end users who had short-term projects. So there are companies out there that hold tech products, and they have warehouses full of tech products, and they have a lease model, so they have that really well made up. But we didn't lease in either of the two companies. We sold directly. I'm not sure about Shaun.
Similar, We primarily sell to resellers. Some of those resellers lease themselves, so they have rental departments. But for us, it's straight hardware sales.
Yeah, and it raises an interesting challenge again around the SaaS component, because when you have a company that you work with who passes on your hardware to the end user, it's the end user that benefits from the software, not the leasing company. So the challenge is often you sell the hardware to one customer, but you want to sell the software to the end user. And so actually your customers can be completely different. And it's a strategic question around how well do you treat your distribution channel?
Yeah.
Right? Now, if you want to really have a good distribution channel that fights for you and works for you, do you give them, a cut basically of the software sale, even though they potentially don't add a lot of value to the software? But if they're looking after your hardware, if they're good, if they service well, if you can rely on them to look after your customers, then maybe you want to bring them in somehow and they can be part of that software solution as well.
Yeah, and I guess we'll most typically just see much smaller margins for those resellers on the software, normal margins on hardware, and kind of these little ticket clips on the on the SaaS product.
Yeah. Cool. Any other questions? Chris.
Shaun, I've got a question for you. Firstly, actually for both of us. Fantastic stuff.
Thank you.
But Shaun, with Dotterel, how long were you operating before you kind of made that pivot into the audio space?
Repeat the question.
Oh, sorry.
I should know it.
I was in the second part as well.
All right. Okay. Just in case.
And in hindsight, I guess, was there anything you think you could have done differently to reach that realization?
Yep. So the question is, I guess, on that earlier pivot from the drones and that sort of space, then going over to film and media.
Yeah, absolutely. So we started out in 2017, so we're definitely not the newest kids on the block. And it took about 3 years, so kind of getting to 2020, where we kind of made that dirty word pivot and changed changed the focus of what is platform technology. So it's almost been kind of half, where we were very focused on kind of very specific applications, and I didn't go into it in the presentation, but we've always alongside the microphone array technology, we're doing drone noise reduction as well, so making drones quieter through low noise propulsion technology, and we've built up some fantastic capability there, and still remains to a small extent a contracting part of Dotterel and Earner. But it wasn't really until we got to that kind of 2020 point that Konos was born, and the company was quite different. So kind of 50-50 on kind of drone stuff, and then platform, and the other 50% on platform and entering the entertainment market. I think that hey, it's hindsight's always 2020, and there's always like parts of this journey where I kick myself for not doing certain things quicker, and there's that moment when you made that first prototype for the entertainment market, and it was just kind of easy. Like, we've been battling just doing demos overseas where you're needing to try to get airspace clearance, you're getting trying to work out the radio networks for that frequencies for that area, and it's just everything is just super hard. And then you create this product, the standalone product, and it just kind of turns on and works. And a demo is super easy. You go to a recording house and let them play with it. So yeah, hey, I guess we had to go through all of those learnings early on to just get to where we are today, and that's kind of the long and short of it. It kind of is what it is, and it's always part of the journey.
And I guess that's product development. Really, overall, it's maybe a little bit more difficult. There's a bit of a leap of faith when you come to hardware, because there's that money to actually make that change. So yeah, for sure.
And there's definitely been those big leaps of faith where it's you're going to make a major change. It's going to cost a lot of money, and it's going to add this much time to the product roadmap, and you've just got to bite the bullet and do it. And we've done that many times, and usually it works out, but not always.
Not always. Yep. Any questions? Oh, yes. Yeah, so for those that are on YouTube online, just type your questions into the chat, and Anthony will pick up on those. So yeah, pop them in there.
Was there one in front?
Yep.
Shaun, got much IP?
So the question is just around IP for Dotterel.
Yes, we do. My background's actually in IP law originally. So we have a portfolio of about 6 patents at various patent applications, more granted but not at this stage. And the kind of that portfolio has really evolved from what was very kind of an array on a drone implementation now to just kind of the Konos product, and it's kind of protecting the roadmap and all the features coming out of that. But having a strong IP patent portfolio has been really, really important to us. And even kind of now, as we've got a brand, kind of protecting the trademarks and all the other intangibles around that.
Yeah. And what about you, John, with Aeroqual and
early stage? When we were at our early stage, yes. We had several patents. As the company got more mature and got a little bit older, both companies, the frequency of patent filing reduced, because what tends to happen, I think, is that you broaden your product offering, to meet more of your customers' needs, but you're also playing in a space which has been a little bit commoditized by other players. But you also trade highly on your brand reputation of the quality of that initial offering.
Yeah.
But you can only obviously patent something that's genuinely unique, and it's rare for a company to continue to be able to innovate at that level.
Yeah, and I guess there was some core technology stuff. Well, I think with the sensors, wasn't it, with Aeroqual?
Yes, at Aeroqual, we produced something called a gas-sensitive semiconductor sensor, which was able to measure ozone and NO2 and all of the major pollutants in the environment. We were able to do that at about 1/100th of the cost of the incumbent technology, so that was credible for the market. And we enjoyed a lot of dominance in the market at that level. And also at Aofrio, previously Wellington Drive, they made a high-efficiency electrically commutated motor, which was able to operate for up to 10 years at low power, very stable. And so, and that was patented, and we enjoyed, being unique in the market in that environment for a long time. But, eventually, the engineers will come back from China, having, with the latest replica, the latest knockoff. It happens, and it's very challenging in the hardware space. And so as we grew, we really had to get outside of our core IP. Our customers just said, "What else have you got?" And we said, "Well, what other components do you work with on a daily basis?" And they said, "Well, we work with these and these." We looked at those, realized that we could build them better than our competition. Not uniquely enough to patent, but at high enough quality that our customers said, "Well, we already buy the core tech from you. Why don't we buy all the other bits as well?" So sometimes it's not always about doing something unique. It's about just doing something else slightly better than your competition.
And I guess you've done a lot of work in the software space with that. Has having the big software component to it, has that sort of also had an impact on how you patent things?
Yeah, that's a good question. I think both companies started to get into what you could call the big data space. So with air quality monitoring, we had one of the largest air quality monitoring networks in London, servicing the London construction industry. That's a lot of data that you generate from hundreds and hundreds of air quality monitoring networks, and there's forecasting models you can build around that. So it wasn't until we had the install base that we could actually gather up all that data and start to maybe repackage it and do something a little bit different with it in software. In Aofrio, we have our products in 1 to 2 million bottle coolers around the world. There's a huge drive now from brands like Coke and Pepsi to for ESG, environmental sustainability. But refrigeration is about the 3rd biggest energy cost next to heating. So what we're offering now is the ability to run those coolers at much lower energy cost by controlling the cooler. But when you have data from millions of these things, that's hugely valuable to the brands. And so maybe yes, there is the software component on aggregate adds independent value from the hardware.
Right. Yep. As opposed to IP.
As opposed to IP, again, targeting something that you can patent may or may not work, but just adding value. Just saying, hey, we've got all this data that we collect for you, and let's just put it together in a slightly different way. And all of a sudden, you've got something uniquely valuable.
And that's something that other people can't really replicate.
Unless they have your install base. Right. And that's that tricky balance between, maintaining your hardware install base, but also recognizing that there are other hardware players out there. But if you can bring their data into your platform, then you can be 50% of the hardware solution, but 100% of the software solution.
Mhm.
And
Yeah.
they're playing the same game as well.
Yeah.
So it's a really, really tricky strategic game. Yeah.
Was there a lot of learning for you on how to monetize that data and like build a
Yes.
business model around that?
Yes,
Yep.
there was a lot.
How long have we got?
It's challenging. So I guess there's a couple of things you can do for a customer. One is you can save them money. So you can be a cost down component for their operations, or you can help make them money. And there's a real difference that I've noticed between those two value offerings. If you're offering something to someone to save them money, then you're talking with a customer who is a cost center in their operation. And if you're talking to someone whose job it is to save money, it's quite difficult to sell them a product, right? Because you have to make them believe that if you buy this thing from me at this price, you're going to save this much money. So that's a challenging thing to sell. And so you really have to understand their business model, because you have to be able to prove to them that I can save you money. If you're selling to someone whose job it is to sell, right, and you can make an argument that if you buy my product, you can sell a hell of a lot more of your product, quite often they'll just try it because they're a revenue center.
That makes sense.
So it just depends, and then pricing that can sometimes be more of a value-based pricing model, whereas pricing something that's around saving money tends to be a cost-based or cost-plus pricing model.
Yeah.
So it just depends a little bit on who you're talking to.
Yep. Cool. Any other questions? I'll give you the microphone since you're close.
Thanks. Hey, I just wondered if either of you actually ever had to fight to protect a patent.
I can't say that. Hey, I've had a more than I can count of those fake infringement letters that you start getting at a certain point in business, and they just stack up on your desk and you ignore them. Patent trolls send them up, but nothing legitimate ever that I could point to. It would be a scary day if that happened. But, yeah.
Yeah. Well, that's the thing with those. You've got to be able to fight for it.
Defend it.
Defend it.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Yeah, and in my case, not personally, but our CTO for Aeroqual has had to fight a little bit. Also at Aofrio, not so much these days, because I think at least the patents are expiring at some stage. So that's how old the IP is. But we have had to trademark fight, interestingly.
Trademark, right?
So that was an interesting challenge. Yeah.